36-year-old Eliza Wood had a routine. Every day she walked to 58 Union Street West in Oldham, her mother's house, a boarding house, the kind of place where people came and went and the kitchen was always warm and the front door was always busy. She had 2 daughters. She was separated from her husband. She wore her wedding ring still, although few people who knew her ever heard her mention Willie Wood. She was getting on with things, the way people do. She was known to the boarders. She was known to the neighbours. She went out in the evenings when she could get away, to the local pubs, mostly with James Corbitt, who had been lodging at her mother's house for several months and who had a good singing voice and way of making an evening feel lighter than it was. On the 20th of August 1950, Eliza Wood was found dead in room 7 of the Prince of Wales Hotel on Stamford Street in Ashton-under-Lyne. She was 36 years old. She'd been strangled, and the word whore had been written across her forehead in ballpoint pen. Her name appears in almost every account of this case as an ancillary detail, a footnote to a story about 2 men, a pub, and a hangman's memoir. That's not the story I'm telling today. Welcome to Manchester Murders. I'm your host Susan, and today I'm telling the story of the murder of Eliza Wood in August 1950, a woman who has spent the 75 years since largely absent from her own story. Union Street West sat in the working heart of Oldham, in a town still organised around the mills that had built it and the terraced streets that had housed the people who worked in them. The cotton trade had been declining for years. The interwar depression had taken a serious toll and it had never fully recovered. But the mills were still there, still turning, still the economic engine of the place. It was the kind of street where you knew who lived 2 doors down and you could tell by the time the mills' hooters went whether it was a Tuesday or a Thursday. Eliza Clark was born on the 6th of August 1914 in Oldham, the daughter of Matthew Clark, a mill worker, and his wife Laura, née Maxwell. She was baptised at St Thomas's Church in Wearmouth 2 months later. She grew up in the town, one of several children in a household that, by 1921, was living at 16 Bower Street in the Mumps district, a cotton mill workers' family, like most of their neighbours. In January 1934, at the age of 19, she married William Wood, known as Willie, a cotton spinner from Hollinwood. She was Elizabeth Wood from that day forward, though almost everyone called her Liza. By September 1939, she was back at her mother's address on Union Street West, listed in the National Register as married, her occupation recorded as unpaid house duties. Willie Wood was not there. He was living separately at 27 Green Street, Oldham, and had registered himself, oddly, as a widower. Whatever the state of the marriage by that point, the register catches them at a distance from each other, 2 people describing the same situation in different terms, from different addresses, on the same autumn day. During the war years, despite the separation, contact continued. In April 1942, Eliza gave birth to a daughter, Laura, named for her own mother. In the summer of 1945, a second daughter arrived, Edith, named for Eliza's younger sister. By 1950, she was living on Knott Street in Oldham, raising the 2 girls alone. Laura was 8, Edith was 4. Willie Wood was somewhere else, still in Oldham, the marriage unresolved. Her mother's boarding house on Union Street West remained a fixed point. Eliza called in every day, helped where she could, knew the lodgers. One of the regulars, by the middle of 1949, was a man called James Henry Corbitt. James Corbitt was 37, a tool maker also from Oldham. Thin, rather mournful in appearance, though people remembered his sense of humour and the singing voice that could hold a room. He'd been lodging at 58 Union Street West for several months when he and Eliza started going out together, mostly to the local pubs in the evenings when she could get away. When he sang, people said he would look at her directly, as though she were the only person there. Corbitt was separated from his own wife and had 4 children. He and Eliza found each other in a familiar space, 2 people living in the gap between a marriage that had ended and a life that hadn't yet settled into something new. From the beginning of 1950, he was keeping a diary. It was a small pocketbook. On the first page, he'd written his name, his national registration number, his national insurance number, the bureaucratic particulars of a man who wanted his property returned if he lost it. There was an entry for almost every date. Read in sequence, it tells the story of a relationship moving from elation to obsession to something the prosecution at his trial would call, with precision, expressed malice. The 20th of January. Having got a new job, I decided I would never see Liza again. The 27th. Made it up with Liza. Had a good night and was intimate. The 5th of February. For no reason whatever, was very depressed all day. The 31st of March. Mind is a blank today. Mental strain. Impossible to think. And then, on the 21st of February, this. Was drunk last night. Liza told me that after being intimate with her, I nearly strangled her. That entry was written 6 months before Eliza was killed. There was another lodger at the boarding house. His name was Tommy. Corbitt was convinced that Eliza was seeing him, jealous in the way that consumes rather than questions. When he confronted Eliza about it, she told him at different times that Tommy was her brother and then her cousin. He was neither. He was a lodger with no particular claim on her. But Corbitt's jealousy did not require accurate information. It only required a target. Towards the middle of July 1950, Mrs. Clark was away on an extended holiday. Eliza was staying at the boarding house full-time, running things in her mother's place. On a Thursday evening, Anne Barrett, a 22-year-old boarder who worked in one of the local cotton mills, saw Corbitt leave the house alone at around 8 o'clock. She thought nothing of it. She noticed Eliza go out a few minutes later, and she went to bed around midnight. Sometime between 1 and 2 in the morning, she heard Corbitt return and go to his room. At around 4, she heard Eliza come in through the front door and go into the kitchen. At 7, Anne went downstairs. She found Eliza in a chair, a white cloth on her head, blood across her clothing. She lifted off the cloth. 2 cuts on the back of Eliza's head, bleeding heavily. She poured cold water over the wounds at Eliza's request, and then Eliza passed out. Another boarder, Mary Chorley, had already been woken by Eliza knocking at her door at around 5 o'clock, her face smeared with blood. Mary had bathed the back of her head and gone back downstairs. At around 6:30, she met Corbitt in the hallway, coming down to get ready for work. She asked him why he had attacked Mrs. Wood. He said, "I don't know really what came over me. I'm sorry that I have done it. I was jealous." That evening, Anne Barrett asked Corbitt what had happened. He took her upstairs to his room, closed the door, and told her quietly that he was in love with Eliza, but believed she was seeing Tommy. He admitted battering her over the head the previous night. When he'd left her, he said, he thought she was dead. He told Anne that if he could not have Eliza, the other man wouldn't either. He would finish her off. Anne told him to leave the house and forget about Eliza. He made no reply, but a few days later she noticed they were going out together again. No charge was brought, no record appears of any police involvement. Eliza had survived a serious attack at the hands of a man who had told witness he intended to kill her, and then apparently they reconciled. The diary continued. The 3rd of July. Had a row with Liza about her keep telling lies. Told her I had finished with her. The 13th of July. Had a hectic night. A miracle saved her. That entry was written 10 days before the assault, which means the diary records what appears to be a prior occasion when, in his own mind, he had come close and had not followed through. A miracle, his word for it. The 5th of August. We were intimate in bed. She wishes she was my wife. The 12th of August. Booked a room for Liza and I tonight. She should have met me at 5:30 but did not turn up. I will finish with her. The 17th of August. Praying for one more chance to get Liza in a position to finish her off. Have lost a few opportunities. Towards the end of July, Corbitt had left Union Street West and moved to lodgings at 212 Portland Street in Ashton-under-Lyne. On the Saturday before the murder, he told his landlady, Martha Ann Shaw, that he was expecting his wife. Mrs. Shaw told him that she would not allow that sort of thing on her premises. He left that evening and did not come home until the following day. On the evening of Saturday the 19th of August 1950, Alfred Egan was behind the bar of the Prince of Wales Hotel on Stamford Street, managing the Saturday night rush. A man came in and asked for a room, for himself and his wife, he said. Egan said he could have room 7 and asked where the wife was. She'll be coming along later. The man took the key and went back outside. At 11:30 he returned with a woman. She was stumbling as she walked, waving to people in the bar. "Take no notice," the man said. "She's had a drink or 2. Shortly after midnight, the pub closed and Egan began tidying up. He heard thumps from upstairs, 8 or 10 of them. He went up and knocked on the door of room 7. "Is everything all right?" A man's voice from inside. "We've just fallen out of bed." Egan asked him to keep the noise down and went back to the bar. At 1:15, the man came downstairs in his trousers and shirt, apparently looking for the side entrance. Egan directed him to the toilet. He went back upstairs, but at 2:15 he came down again, saw Egan still there, and retreated once more. The following morning, Sunday the 20th of August, the hotel cleaner Margaret Bailey arrived early. She made a cup of tea and saw a man at the bottom of the stairs, fully dressed. He said he was a resident, asked what time breakfast was, and then said he didn't want it yet. "I'm going for a walk until 8:30. He left through the side entrance. Margaret decided to take a cup of tea up to his wife anyway. She knocks on room 7. No answer. She went in. The curtains were drawn, but in the dim light she could see a woman lying on her back in the right-hand bed, blankets pulled tight around her neck. She set the tea on the bedside cabinet. On the other bed lay a folded eiderdown and a woman's underclothes. On the floor a pair of shoes. On the bed a woman's coat. She thought nothing of it. A couple back from a Saturday night, things scattered where they'd dropped them. She turned to leave. But something made her stop. She went back and shook the woman gently by the shoulder. The woman didn't move. She pulled the blankets back. The woman was naked, her face slightly blue. In the dim light filtering through the curtains, Margaret Bailey could see letters written on her forehead. She ran. "Mr. Egan, that woman in number 7. I think she's dead." Sergeant Arthur Bradley of the Lancashire Constabulary arrived at 8:40 in the morning and went straight up to room 7. He took stock of it carefully. Small and sparsely furnished. 2 beds, a dressing table, a wardrobe, a bricked-up fireplace with a hand basin and mirror above it. On the mantelpiece, a brooch, some beads, a woman's earrings, a hairpin. On the hearth, used matches and cigarette ends. On the bedside cabinet between the beds, a cup and saucer, an ashtray with 5 cigarette ends and a spent match. And on the cabinet, a woman's red plastic handbag. The dead woman lay on her back. The word whore had been written across her forehead in letters approximately an inch high in ballpoint pen. Bradley noted everything, left the room, and found a bead on the floor outside that appeared to match the string on the mantelpiece. He pocketed it. D.I. Whittingham arrived from Ashton-under-Lyne at 9. D.C. William Dodding, the official police photographer, arrived at 10 and worked through the room. DCI Colin Campbell, head of the Fingerprint Bureau at Lancashire Police Headquarters at Hutton, found palm prints on the headboard of the bed on which the body lay, and on the head and foot of the bed opposite. At 12:30, Dr. Walter Henry Grace arrived to examine the body. Dr. Grace was a lecturer in forensic medicine at Liverpool University and the Home Office pathologist for the North Western region. His report, now held at the National Archives and closed until 2046, is quoted in part by Alan Hayhurst in his account of the case. The woman was dead and unclothed. Her face was slightly cyanosed. There were marks of violence on the neck, bruises and friction marks from the pressure of beads, and a separate friction mark from a thin ligature. bruises on the inside of the upper arms, the hyoid bone disrupted by manual pressure, a slight smell of alcohol. Death was due to manual strangulation. Dr. Grace removed a section of skin from the forehead and handed it to Alan Thompson of the Northwestern Forensic Science Lab at Preston. Thompson later confirmed that the ink on the skin matched the ink in a biro pen recovered from the suspect. He also received, on the 24th of August, 4 pieces of black shoelace, 3 of the same type, 1 different. He could not say whether the 3 had originally formed a single lace. The woman was identified from documents in her red handbag as Eliza Wood of Knott Street, Oldham. A description of the man seen with her was circulated across the country. While it went out, the inquiry cast about in other directions. Officers under Chief Superintendent C.N. Lindsay searched the South East Lancashire district for a man thought to be a public house singer, and made inquiries among the stallholders and van dwellers of a local fairground, on a theory that Eliza had been there in company with a man. In the end, it was a 999 call that found him. Word reached headquarters that the wanted man was at 212 Portland Street in Ashton. Sergeant Bradley went straight to the address on the Monday morning and found James Henry Corbitt lying on his bed. He admitted his name and was taken to the station. D.I. Whittingham interviewed Corbitt at the county police office in Ashton-under-Lyne. He told him a woman had been found murdered at the Prince of Wales Hotel, a woman identified as Eliza Wood, with whom the inspector said he had reason to believe Corbitt had been associating. Corbitt was cautioned. He said nothing for a few moments, and then, "I don't know why I did it. She started shouting, and I got her by the throat. We struggled and fell off the bed onto the floor, and I tied a bootlace round her neck to finish her. Afterwards I lifted her on the bed. I cut the lace up and threw it away as I was walking home." Whittingham asked who had printed the word on her forehead. Corbitt reached into his jacket pocket and produced a biro pen and a penknife. "I did it with this. I can write a long story about it all," he said mournfully. He made a written statement and was formally charged. On the statement sheet he wrote, "I have nothing to say at present." When searched, a small diary was found in his pocket, in the same handwriting as the statement. Its entries ended the day before Eliza died. At the identification parade held the following day, the landlord, Alfred Egan, failed to pick Corbitt out, but the cleaner, Margaret Bailey, had no hesitation. The inquest on Eliza Wood opened at Ashton-under-Lyne and was adjourned almost immediately, after the coroner refused Corbitt's solicitor, Mr. George Furness of Manchester, permission to view the body alongside the jury. It was adjourned indefinitely. At the magistrates' court hearings that followed through August and September, Furness made an early observation that would prove telling. Most of his information on the case had come from the press. The hearings were stepped through week by week, carefully and without haste, while the newspapers printed what they could establish, which was, as the coverage makes clear, considerably less than what the prosecution held. At a hearing on the 19th of September, the prosecuting solicitor, Mr. Hutchison, described the diary as an extraordinary document and said it would be produced at the Liverpool Assizes as bearing directly on Corbitt's state of mind. He read to the court some more of what it contained. "My intentions for Liza," Corbitt had written, "were to win her affections completely, and when women do not do this without me, I shall play my final card." The last entry read, "Praying for one more chance to get Liza in a position to finish her off. Have lost a few opportunities." The court also heard Corbitt's written statement, including a claim that during the final night, as they struggled, Eliza had shouted, "I want Tommy!" and it was at that moment he strangled her, tying the bootlace round her throat to finish her. Cross-examining the investigating officer, the defence read out 2 diary entries that would later anchor the insanity plea. The 14th of March, reflecting on tomorrow, always seem to be in trouble. Mental strain. Losing control of my brain. Think my brain is turning. The 19th of March, headache on waking. I am insane. Must proceed cautiously. Corbitt was committed to the Liverpool Assizes. The trial opened on the 6th of November 1950 at St George's Hall, Liverpool, before Mr Justice George Justin Linsky. Appearing for the prosecution was Edward Wool, QC, and Corbitt was defended by Mr E. Rowson, QC. He entered the dock in a dark double-breasted suit and bow tie and pleaded not guilty in a firm voice. Wool opened for the prosecution by telling the jury that a morbid, squalid and repugnant tragedy had taken place at the Prince of Wales Hotel in the early morning of August the 20th. The accused, he said, was 37 and had been living apart from his wife and 4 children. The victim, Mrs Eliza Wood, had 2 children aged 8 and 3 and had been living apart from her husband. For 9 months, the accused had lived at Mrs Wood's mother's house. In July, he'd left and taken lodgings in Ashton-under-Lyne, where he'd stayed for about a month before the tragedy. When arrested, a diary had been found on him, whose entries terminated the day before the woman died. Wool then read from the diary. The decision in January never to see Eliza again. The reconciliation a week later. The entry of the 21st of February. Drunk the previous night, Eliza telling him that after being intimate with her, he'd nearly strangled her. The blank days of March, and then the long deterioration of the summer, the row, the hectic night, the miracle, and the entries from August that counted down toward what he called, with the flat precision of a man who had made up his mind, her demise. The jury heard from Alfred Egan about the Saturday night, the room booked for a wife who wasn't there yet, the woman arriving later, unsteady on her feet, the thumps in the night, the man appearing twice downstairs in the small hours and retreating both times. They heard from Margaret Bailey about room 7 on Sunday morning. They heard from Mary Chorley and Anne Barrett about the July assault, blood, the cuts, the admission the following morning, the threat. Corbitt's written statement was read in full, including his account of the final night and his closing claim. I must have been temporarily insane at the time, as I could not have done this thing if I had been sane. The prosecution's answer to that was the diary itself. A man who had been recording near misses and missed opportunities for months, who'd written of praying for one more chance to get Liza in a position to finish her off, was not a man overcome by sudden madness. He was a man who had been working toward this. Rowson called no witnesses, and Corbitt did not enter the witness box. In his closing speech, Rowson acknowledged what the diary contained and described the relationship as one of drinking together, quarrelling, and then making love and occasionally acting like beasts. He asked the jury, in view of the diary's evidence of mood swings, whether such a man could know that what he was doing was morally and legally wrong. He asked for a verdict of guilty but insane. The jury were away for 15 minutes before they returned a verdict of guilty. No mention was made of Corbitt's state of mind. Mr Justice Linsky passed sentence of death. The Home Secretary, Mr Shooter Eade, refused a reprieve on the 25th of November 1950. At 8 o'clock in the morning, on Tuesday the 28th of November 1950, James Henry Corbitt was hanged at Strangeways prison in Manchester. The executioner was Albert Pierrepoint. Pierrepoint was, at that time, the landlord of Help the Poor Struggler, a pub on Manchester Road in the Hollinwood area of Oldham, the same district where Willie Wood had grown up, a few miles from Union Street West, from Knott Street, from the world Eliza had inhabited. He and Corbitt knew each other from the pub. They had a routine. Corbitt would say, "Hello, Tosh," and Pierrepoint would reply, "Hello, Tish," a radio catchphrase that had attached itself to their acquaintance. They'd sung together around the pub piano. On the morning of the execution, the governor told Pierrepoint that the condemned man had made a special request, that when the executioner entered the cell, he would say, "Hello, Tish." Pierrepoint did not know the man by name. When he walked into the condemned cell and recognised Corbitt, he extended a hand. They went through their routine. Corbitt was quickly pinioned and taken to the scaffold. "Come on, Tish, old chap," Pierrepoint said, and the condemned man almost ran. In his memoirs published in 1974, Pierrepoint wrote about what he thought when he returned to the pub after the execution. He described Corbitt as a troubadour who had been more aware than almost any man of the reality of the rope, who had, sitting beside him at the bar, the very man who would one day hang him. He was not only aware of the rope, Pierrepoint wrote. He had the man who handled it beside him singing a duet. The deterrent did not work. That passage and the story around it became the frame through which this case has almost always been told. The irony of this friendship, the duet, the execution, Tish and Tosh. Alan Hayhurst, working from National Archives documents, notes one complication. Pierrepoint's memoir places Corbitt and Eliza in his pub on the fatal night, the 20th of August, the night Corbitt took her to Ashton, booked the room and strangled her. But Corbitt's own account of that evening, as recorded in the police documents, makes no mention of help the poor struggler. The two men knew each other. The recognition in the condemned cell was real. Whether they were together in the pub on that particular night is, as Hayhurst puts it, perhaps best understood as journalistic licence by the hangman. The doubts did not stop at one disputed night. After Pierrepoint gave a series of interviews about his work to the Empire News, the prison commissioners, who had required him to sign the Official Secrets Act, investigated. A letter from the Attorney-General to William Lloyd George MP, dated the 18th of April 1956 and now held at the National Archives, states that Pierrepoint's account of the execution of John Reginald Halliday Christie had been contradicted by two men present, and his account of the execution of Ruth Ellis similarly denied by those who were there. The commissioners concluded that while Pierrepoint could technically be prosecuted for communicating facts, the Official Secrets Act did not forbid the communication of fiction. Pierrepoint's memoir, in other words, was officially assessed as potentially fictional by the very people who had been present at the events it described. The two men knew each other, and that much is not in dispute. But that famous story of the duet and the pub rests on the testimony of a man whose accounts were formally questioned at the highest level. It has, in any case, consumed Eliza Wood entirely. In almost every telling, she is the inciting incident, the reason Corbitt was there and the body in the room. Eliza Wood was born on the 6th of August 1914. She turned 36 just 14 days before she was murdered. She had two daughters, Laura and Edith, named after the women in the Clark family around her, her mother, her younger sister. She was raising them alone on Knott Street when Corbitt killed her. Laura was 8, Edith just 4. Eliza had survived a serious assault at Corbitt's hands just a month before her death. But the law did not reach that house in July 1950, and Eliza went out with him again a few days later. Why she did is not something the record explains, and it's not something that needs explaining on her behalf. People remain in dangerous situations for reasons that are entirely comprehensible and almost never captured in the documents that survive. What the documents do show is the diary, Corbitt's account of 8 months of intent, recorded in his own hand, produced at the trial, used to hang him, and quoted briefly in almost every subsequent account of this case, as a detail in the story of someone else. Eliza is buried at Chadderton Cemetery on the northern edge of Oldham. She was brought home. Willie Wood outlived her by 54 years, dying in Blackpool in March 2004. Eliza's mother continued to keep the boarding house on Union Street West, and Eliza's daughters grew up without her. The case is remembered, when it is remembered, as the story of Tish and Tosh, a man who drank and sang with his executioner and went to the scaffold almost running, and a hangman who came to doubt the value of his work. It's a compelling story, but that's not Eliza's story. Born on the 6th of August 1914, the daughter of Laura Maxwell and Matthew Clark, Eliza married, had daughters, kept going. She called at her mother's house every day. Her name was not Tosh, it was not Tish, it was Eliza Wood, and this was her story.